Why has anti-Semitism become a perennial controversy that keeps erupting like a semi-active volcano on global media headlines? Before dealing with the anti-Semitism phenomenon, let us understand who Semites are and what is their history. Also, why anti-Jewish sentiment is considered anti-Semitism but anti-Arab is not considered so. The ancient Israelites are considered original Semites, descending from the biblical patriarch Abraham. Moses is seen as their key religious leader, said to have united and freed the Israelites from Egyptian slavery circa the 13th century BCE or before Common Era. Over centuries, the Israelites established two biblical Jewish kingdoms centered around Jerusalem with rulers like the heroic King David and the wise King Solomon. The original Semites spoke related Semitic languages and inhabited the Middle East and North Africa. The key ancient Semitic cultures and figures include Akkadians, who were Semitic civilizations centered in ancient Mesopotamia, which is now modern Iraq, Syria. The Mesopotamia area includes these two or most of these two countries. The Akkadian Empire reigned between 2334 and 2154 BCE under Sargon the Great. Phoenicians was the another civilization that emerged around Phoenicians around 3200 BCE in the Levant region, which is Eastern Mediterranean. As renowned ancient sea traders, the Phoenicians spread across the Mediterranean, establishing key ports and trade networks. Another Semitic civilization were the ancient Assyrians, who formed a powerful civilization in Upper Mesopotamia, growing over the second and first millennia BCE into a warlike empire dominating the Middle East under rulers like Tiglath-Pileser and Sargon II. The Babylonian civilization centered on Lower Mesopotamia, inheriting earlier Akkadian Sumerian traditions. The Babylonians most famously constructed the ziggurat of Etemenanki of Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar II's reign, that is between 605 and 562 BCE. The ziggurat was a stepped pyramidal temple tower characteristic of major Mesopotamian cities between around 2200 BC and 500 BCE. Constructed using a mud brick core and baked brick exterior, the tower had no internal rooms. Roughly 25 ziggurats have been discovered to date, with equal numbers originating from Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian civilizations. Overall, the long interwoven histories of ancient and modern Semitic peoples remain complex. While the semantics focus heavily on Jews now, we must understand these connections through balanced ethical approaches accounting for all groups affected across history. In ancient times, both Arabs and Jews traced their ancestral origins back to the biblical patriarch Abraham. Arabs considered their forefather to be Abraham's son Ishmael. The Jewish people descend from Isaac, who was Abraham's son by his wife Sarah. Despite these early connections, Arabs and Jews largely developed separately for centuries. Jews had ancient kingdoms centered in the Levant region but faced conquest first by Babylon and then by Rome. After Rome adopted Christianity, Jews became marginalized as a religious minority, facing periodic persecution. As Christianity took hold across the Middle East and North Africa, many Jewish communities assimilated into the dominant Arab society. Arabic speaking Jewish scholars gained influence in the medieval Islamic world during the Golden Age. In the 7th century CE or Common Era, Islamic Arab armies emerged from the Arabian Peninsula led by Prophet Muhammad. They quickly conquered the Middle East and North Africa, including areas that had remained predominantly Jewish, like Palestine. Over the following centuries, most Jews adopted Arabic language and culture. Under early Muslim rule, Jewish people were considered dhimmis, a protected minority, although facing certain restrictions and extra taxes. While there were sporadic outbreaks of violence, Jewish communities generally flourished culturally and economically during the early Islamic period. There was substantial interfaith cooperation and coexistence. During the 11th century, however, Jews faced heightened persecution like forced conversions or property confiscation. Such repression continued periodically under later Muslim rulers. Things deteriorated substantially during the Crusades, when both Jews and Muslims were massacred by Crusader armies moving through the region. In the 19th and 20th centuries, tensions heightened over the issue of Jewish settlement in Ottoman and British Palestine and the creation of a Jewish national homeland there. This conflict ultimately resulted in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War following Israeli independence. It launched over a century of ongoing struggle between Arab states and Palestinian nationalist groups against the State of Israel. The long history of relatively peaceful coexistence gave way to protracted violent conflict in the modern era. Efforts continue to broker peace. Jews faced extensive persecution and anti-Semitism in Western countries, especially in Europe, over many centuries. In the medieval Europe, anti-Semitism was widespread based on religious grounds. Myths accusing Jews of killing Christ, well poisoning, and blood libel led Catholic mobs and those inspired during the Crusades to attack Jewish communities. Thousands of Jews were massacred, especially during the Black Death. Jews faced expulsions from England, France, and Spain during 13th and 15th centuries. In Imperial Russia, Jews were restricted to living in the Pale of Settlement and endured pogroms, resulting in thousands killed, especially in the 19th century. Anti Semitic persecution increased following the assassination of Alexander II. In the late 19th century, fake anti Semitic conspiracy theories like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion falsely accused Jews of plotting global domination. This fueled racial anti Semitism across Europe. In Germany, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler engaged in virulent, racist, anti Semitic propaganda. After taking power in 1933, Hitler's regime enacted the Nuremberg Laws, depriving Jews of rights. Violence against Jews expanded into a horrifying industrial genocide, killing 6 million Jews across Europe. In the United States, while founding ideals promoted religious tolerance, anti Semitism emerged in forms like people barring Jews from clubs, hotels, and universities. The lynching of Leo Frank in 1915 and the refusal to accept a ship of Jewish refugees fleeing Hitler exemplified American anti Semitism early on. Today, anti Semitic incidents still occur, but decreasing overall as tolerance spreads or expands. In the Western countries, Jews endured everything from legal restrictions to mob violence to attempted genocide based on virulent anti Semitism emerging out of Christianity and then morphing into racial hatred in the modern era of Europe. More acceptance emerged slowly in the 20th century. In recent years, there have been controversies regarding anti Semitism on the campuses of some prestigious American universities. In 2020, a Harvard student group calling itself the Palestine Solidarity Committee held an event featuring a speaker who compared Zionists to Nazis and defended calls for Israel's destruction. In the University of Southern California, a student leader in 2020 was removed after questioning whether a student could maintain maintain an impartial view on their council position because they were Jewish and involved in campus Jewish groups. The latest instance is of the presidents of three prestigious American universities known for their liberal ethos. And these universities are Harvard, Penn, and MIT. Recently faced intense congressional interrogation over outbreaks of anti Semitism across US campuses since the October 2022 flare up of Israel Hamas hostilities. Overall, these controversies sparked tensions on these elite campuses regarding perceptions of unchecked anti Semitism. Administrators condemned incidents, but disagreements simmer over the pervasiveness of anti Jewish bias within campus cultures and student organizations. Balancing free speech, inclusion, and combating bigotry remains an evolving challenge. Anti Jewish sentiment has deep historical roots and remains persistent in parts of Europe and the United States today. After World War II, denazification efforts combated some explicit anti Semitism in public spheres, but implicit bias and neo Nazi sentiments never fully disappeared in sections of European society. Surveys indicate some decline more recently in overt anti Semitic views among European populations, especially younger demographics. However, incidents still occur and memories of World War II atrocities linger culturally. In the US, less pronounced but still very damaging legacies of early anti Jewish discrimination has been lingering even now. For decades, Jews faced restrictions like being barred from clubs, hotels, and universities with notions they didn't fully fit white Christian American identity. High profile incidents like the Leo Frank lynching case reinforced perceptions of them as perpetual outsiders. This fueled lasting insinuations about divided national loyalties. After World War II, shifts towards meritocracy, growing diversity, and expanded civil rights protection helped foster gradual mainstream acceptance of American Jewish identity today, especially among younger generations. Still, fringe nativist groups prone to anti Semitism remain active with incidents reported annually from vandalism to online trolling campaigns. It likely requires sustained concerted efforts across schools, media, etc., to counterbalance centuries long legacies at social levels completely. But positive trends exist. While historically the Jewish people have endured tremendous persecution to promote balanced discourse, there are instances in history where Jewish individuals or groups have also perpetrated harmful acts or exploitation against others. As early financiers and moneylenders in medieval Europe, several Jewish businessmen engaged in predatory lending practices that, while common across the industry, increased anti Semitic backlash when peasants blamed all Jews collectively for abusive high interest loans. However, context is vital, as lending was one of few professions open to Jews who faced exclusion from guilds, land ownership, and many occupations. Some Zionist factions in British Palestine following World War II, most notably the Irgun and Lehi paramilitary groups, employed highly volatile military tactics. This included bombings, killing hundreds of Arab civilians, along with British authorities prior to Israeli independence. Their actions tainted early Israeli state formation in the eyes of Arab world. More recently, examples persist of Israeli politicians making extremist remarks, promoting prejudice or harmful policies against Israeli Arabs and Palestinians. Vocal human rights organizations counter the Israeli government's controversial occupation and settlement policies in Palestinian territories from a place of conscience, law, and ethics. And nobody can ignore what has been done to the hapless people of Gaza. While violence, verbal or physical, against Jews and not Arabs is labeled anti Semitism, aren't the reasons more political than historical? Well, anti Semitism is specifically associated with prejudice or discrimination against Jewish people, not Arabs or other Semitic peoples, and there are reasons for it. The term anti Semitism was coined in 1879 by German journalist Wilhelm Marr to refer specifically to anti Jewish racism. It was never intended to apply to discrimination against other Semitic peoples like Arabs. While Arabs, Assyrians, and other groups are technically also ethnic Semites, in common usage, Semitic refers primarily to Jews. This is likely because Jews have faced the longest history of prejudice and discrimination amongst Semitic groups. Anti Semitism targeting Jews has some unique elements that set it apart from discrimination against other ethnic or religious groups, such as conspiracy theories about global Jewish control. These unique forms of anti Jewish racism have come to define what anti Semitism refers to. Leading scholars on racism and both Jewish and Arab advocacy groups accept that anti Semitism refers specifically to anti Jewish attitudes and not to discrimination against Arabs or other Semitic groups. This accepted usage precedence further solidifies the term's meaning. So, history, semantics, the uniqueness of anti Jewish racism, and widely accepted usage all contribute to anti Semitism being identified with hostility targeting Jews rather than a blanket discrimination against all Semitic peoples. The term has never applied equally to atrocities against Arabs or other groups. Vagaries of historical processes? Well, that's how it is.